Welcome to Kim Talks Resilience, where we share stories of insight and inspiration in life, love, and business with resilient women from around the world. Speaking with authors, entrepreneurs, founders, and coaches to learn their strategies for a more resilient life so we can all build the life we love. I'm your host, Kim Hayden. Welcome back to Kim Talks. Super excited today because I'm going to get the opportunity to talk to a fellow. Well, Kansas, maybe Missouri. We'll find that out. But basically, all in like my stomping grounds. But we're going to be talking a lot today. Really diving into kind of that happiness space. We are seeing record statistics on depression, disconnection, the dysregulation within our society and the human element right now. And I think the more conversations we have, the more likelihood you're going to find someone that you connect with. Now, I will give you a little insight here. The reality is I really like this gal. She wouldn't even have to say anything because, I love a redhead. I got 2 of them at home. We have tons of them in the family. And, I think we're going to get an incredible story that is as colorful as not only our guest today's work history and insight, but also her personality. So super excited to have Kara to the show today. She is a published author, speaker, nervous system and subconscious reprogramming expert, and a top ranked podcast host. As the host of the Happiness Habit podcast and founder of the Unshakable Woman, she trains highly driven women to master their mental and emotional physical health. Through the integration of neurological reprogramming, physiological immersion, and spiritual practices, she presents a revolutionary, fully immersive approach to the world of mental and emotional wellness. She is a sought-after thought leader specializing in the human trauma and PTSD in the behavioral health field. Kara brings success and in entrepreneurship and coaching, spending years working in event production and team building for Tony Robbins. Her expertise has been featured in the Kansas City Star, KCTV Five, Mental Health News Radio Network, Rumble, Voyage, KC Magazine, and Authority Magazine. So I want everybody to, sit tight and please welcome Kara Payton. Hello, gorgeous.
Hello there. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited. So I didn't tell you beforehand. I love redheads. I've got 2 redheads at home and they keep me on my toes. My sister has redheads. We have redheads all throughout the family. So
They're a rare breed.
very rare breed and usually pretty unique and high thought, like high ideation. All the redheads I know are very high ideation individuals. And I don't know if that's a follicle thing or if that's just a coincidental thing. So, Kara, before we dive into what you do, because I really want to get to the meat of this, because as I mentioned in the opening, I know that our mental health, we are in crisis. We are in crisis. As we record this, folks, we had yet another mass shooting in the United States now, 199 for the first 4 months of the year. So this doesn't happen because everybody's happy and everybody's well balanced. This happens because there's a deficiency within our space, within our connectivity in our society. Before we get there, though, I want you to please share a little bit of who is Kara.
That's a dynamic question. And I feel like for most of us, that can be a very dynamic question. I am a product of divorce and adoption and product of being in the Midwest in a low income upbringing and created my own world from a very early age of having this disenchanted family story kind of come unhinged at the very tender age of 13. Nothing else is going on at the age of 13 without having a complete family upset and understanding that you're the adopted child. But it played out with a lot of very messy at first, or I'd probably say from 13 to 24 was just this uncoupling of so much. I ended up pregnant pregnant, miscarriage, pregnant again at the tender age, bringing in life into this world at 19, and grew up very, very fast and very quick. Ended up in recreating a lot of the violence and the chaos and the dysfunction that was going on in my own home. Learned so many of my lessons growing up, getting married to in a domestic violence situation of my own, and then just a toxic relationship that ended up in another marriage with a person that was just as traumatized and just as hurt and just as broken as I was. And it didn't take until a life crisis at, I would say, 28 years old, where I realized there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to life, all of this. So I'm a deep thinker. I'm a deep feeler. And I understand that as I learned the hard way of all of my lessons, that my biggest desire for the world is to end emotional suffering that leads to suicidal ideation and mental disorders. And the best way to do that is that awareness piece, the empathy piece, and the connection piece.
And connection is huge, because connection, I think, is actually being used against us right now through social media, through, not good enough. What side of the aisle are you on? That's, uh, and it's funny because I think that you actually wrote my bio also, because 19 kid, is this really a Kansas story, a Midwest story? Because it sounds like I'm a couple decades older than you. But yeah, it sounds like we got to stop this, because a couple decades after me, it shouldn't still be going on. So let's walk through what you do, because this is really important. It's really important, because our legacy is not the airplane you have or the products you're trying to get. The legacy is the human quote that you're leaving behind and that you present.
Absolutely. And I spent a long time searching the other legacy, trying to check off the boxes with the car and the huge house and the finances and the fancy clothes and the status and all of that. I did that. And I actually successfully climbed what I would consider the summit of that success mountain. And having grown up in the chaos that I had, we had financial chaos, we had emotional chaos, we had mental chaos, we had familial chaos. We just had so much going on that I actually thought that attaining a sense of security, by financially or emotionally or mentally, that I would have cured that wound and broken that cycle. And so after I checked off all the boxes trying to attain this success as I defined it falsely, from trying to compensate from where I came from, I reached the moment where I realized that's not, oh gosh, that doesn't do anything. Here I am, the last box has been checked, and my life still doesn't make any sense to me. My life still doesn't feel like home to me. I still don't have peace. I'm still unhappy. I'm still anxious. All of these things that I thought would go away in the attaining of wealth and riches, it's still here. And so in a panic moment, in a state, I asked God or the universe, or however I related at the time, if this is all there is to life, let me have peace. Let me have peace. Give me the peace bit, because it was the only box that remained there that I could not check through the means that I was trying to do. And then I gave it a caveat. I said, if that's not all there is to life, then break me open and show me what it is, because I'm missing something, and I've been missing something for nearly 30 years. What is the piece that I don't have? And within weeks, I ended up selling everything I owned, moving to Japan, becoming a complete shell of myself, and ended up moving 2 days before Christmas into an empty house with no belongings, with nothing I owned. And in a state of that emptiness, and in that unshelling, that brand new life that I could create whatever I wanted to, I understood in that moment that it wasn't about the things that I could acquire. It was about the things that I could become, and who was going to shape and who was going to become in that space. I was trying to build myself with the building blocks of all of the things that we define in the world as successful, instead of, I was the opposite of I was wealthy on the outside and bankrupt on the inside. And so I started doing the very, very uncomfortable work of seeking that internal journey. And it was the most sentimentally valuable time of my life. I remember that house. I remember that journey. I remember the start. And as it may have appeared on the outside, it was my refuge. It was my safe haven. I loved that house. I loved the emptiness. I loved the freedom. And instead of feeling like a fish out of water in this house where all my security and all everything's super established, I felt more at home and more alive eating Christmas dinner on a Home Depot box in an empty house than I did with every single built up security one could even possibly imagine. I was making more money than I could spend, and everything was established, and I felt hollow. So what I do to bridge into a long-winded way of answering is to help people understand that our true wealth and our true happiness and all of that comes from this inner journey toward ourselves, toward our core, and finding out who that is by first essentially selling off the emotional mental bandwidth of who we're not and figuring out who we're not first, because we have learned so many things that are inaccurate to our intrinsic eternal selves. We've learned how to relate, and since 2020, I know you know the statistics of everything just skyrocketed, because essentially what we did is we took the busyness, the RSVPs and the obligations and the things that we were doing to distract and numb out and stay busy. We went home and we didn't have anything else to focus on. We were not distracted. We had nothing else to help us avoid the truth. And that truth was staggering for some and impossible for some. And that's where we didn't have an increase in anxiety or depression or suicide. We just had a magnifying glass on what is there that was successfully being covered for a long time. And some of us didn't make it out. And then you have the collective trauma added on top of that, of what happened to us, and the fear that was so fermented. You already have a fear based on, what we're discovering in the walls and the privacy of our own minds. But then you have this collective trauma that has magnified every single thing we could possibly be afraid of. And the world that we live in today is nothing more than the result and the outcome of those two things combining without enough coverage, without enough guidance, without enough support. And it's kind of where we are now.
And yet the self-discovery may feel even harder with food scarcity, increasing cost of living. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure the Kardashians are lovely, and I do pick on them quite often. But the reality is when people are trying to keep up with the Kardashians, it's no longer keeping up with the Smiths. Right? If I can just be that, if I can just be 10 pounds thinner, if I can just be, $10 an hour or richer, if I can just be, then I'll be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But we do have some very serious core underlying challenges right now, which is in the financial space. It is more expensive to be alive right now than it was 36 months ago. So when you're walking people through this and you're dealing with the compounding effect of not having the base level understanding. So when we grow up in chaos, a lot of people grow up in chaos. You're in emotional chaos, financial chaos, there's always something going on. It's easier to stay in chaos, so we create chaos, right? But then when we compound that with maybe they do have financial instability, how do you help people navigate that? Because especially for men, we're seeing some really staggering numbers, some very scary things for our young men, and even men over 50 is a trend. And there's a lot going on around us. How do you walk me through that if you're open to that? I'd love to kind of get some insight, because I do, as a mother of two adult young males, I do think about this and where is their mental health?
Absolutely. It's of course, it's not as much of a game on what's going on the outside. It is, even in these things that appear to really, really kind of take control of our standard of living or anything that's going to affect us personally, it is more or less taking people that have these mindsets and stories that are affected by a fear of poverty, fear of criticism. And men, unfortunately, are in a spotlight right now of fear of criticism, where we've taken anything that involves masculine energy and we have vilified it. We make it something wrong. And so you have men at the core who feel like they have to disenfranchise themselves from their true nature in order to survive in the world. We emasculate them. And then we are not masculating, but we are making women in charge of things that are more masculine in nature. And so we have two core polar opposites being disenfranchised from their nature. And then we're telling them to go survive in the world, and we're going to go, be the happiest person you can be. And here's all these things that you need out there in the world. And marketing essentially just magnifies the things that you don't have and tells you what you need to be more whole or more complete. And here's all the things you need to buy. And it's the drag and drop. And so by the time someone comes to me in needing help and needing coaching and needing some sort of shift or some sort of mindset, something to adopt that's new, I'm actually challenging the narrative itself. They don't need more of something. They don't need another thing to remember. They don't need another habit to take on. They don't need another dietary restriction. They don't need another routine, something to add to their morning routine. They need to unlearn a lot of things. And in a place where, the outside is already there, they're in an amygdala survival state of mind anyway. They're already in the fear of scarcity, the fear of poverty. They're operating by only what preserves them longer, by only what consistently assures their survival. And the problem with that is all the extra things that really are important, either they discount it that it's not going to work because they're like, I don't have time for the extra stuff. Just tell me what they want. Strategy. And the strategy from a fear or a scarcity mindset is never going to work, because the energy, like you said, the energy creates the outcome. And so when you can get them out of survival mind, at very least, the first thing that we have to do is we have to get them out of survival mindset, which is usually done by redefining the story of what they've gotten there, watching the lens that they're viewing the world in, watching the language that they are then using to perceive what's in that lens, and how they are defining it to where that it could be an invitation or a death sentence. It could be, depending on how they're viewing their world, they usually have this story already made up about what they're trying to do and achieve in the world, and all of the barriers and all of the blocks and all of the battles. And then life becomes, instead of a dance, it's now a battle. Well, how does someone operate when they believe life is a battle? They're fighting. And if they're fighting, they're not creating. If they're at war, they are not creating anything that is the opposite. It's all about this it's all about this story and this narrative. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get someone to understand their story and how they have defined everything and their lens, and see that completely clearly. And then we have to break away what is emotion and what is fact. Because in that survival place, everything is terrifying, everything is bigger, everything is closer, everything is more colorful. And we have to get them to be just detached enough to where they can start making clear decisions about what they want and who they are. And then in the who they are creates these daily, small, measurable things that they can do to help move the needle in an opposite direction and help reinforce their identity. Because chances are, up until this point, they've said a lot of things that they want. None of it's clear. They're not doing anything toward it. There's no measurable, discernible difference between 6 months ago and 6 months from now. And so they don't know who they are. They don't know what they want. They're lost. They feel it. They're defining everything as against them. And it's just a self-fulfilling cycle and prophecy. But if you tackle down what they want and who they want to become, these things, and they practice it religiously, they start making a decision that doesn't consult with their emotions. They start making small micro decisions that keep promises to themselves, which is ultimately the biggest builder of confidence and clarity. These small micro decisions. So that's the first thing that I do when somebody comes into that world, is we got to establish those two things.
And that's in that whole space of, vision boarding and or not vision boarding, but creating the vision, right? Building the vision of where you're going. And I find that a lot of people build it at the 3,000-foot level and not at the 3 steps in front of me level.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to lose 50 pounds, but they don't build it down into, I'm going to lose 5 pounds. And what is that 3 steps? What are the 3 steps I can do to create that space? With because so this is all, it's so many of our issues obviously are within our head, right?
Mhm.
It's within our behaviors, our set patterns, and our fear cycle. Fear is greater than than happiness. It's easier to frown. It's easier to get angry than it is to put the energy in to be happy, right? It's just, what did they say? You can't have a negative and a positive happening in your brain at the same time. Isn't that
Absolutely.
that's the thing? So walk me through that, because in order to get people to move through their PTSD and their challenges, I think you have to get them aware that it's a constant work. There is no shortcuts. I think there's a
100%.
lot of people pitching shortcuts. I know a
Yes.
woman who has significant childhood trauma, significant, like movie-worthy childhood trauma, and she self-sabotages all the time. But she wants to go for microdosing, or she picks one thing that she thinks is gonna fix it. She refuses to do kind of this engagement therapy, right? This engagement talk language. Walk me through how somebody can shift their mindset so they are receptive to doing the hard work, because nothing comes easy, right?
Absolutely. So the reception and your mind's programming are they're after two separate
Okay.
things.
Walk me
Your
through this, because you're the expert.
So there is actually nothing inside of our brains that will seek the positive, the good, or anything that could potentially be anything that could even resemble positivity. It will not look for those signs. It will not look for happiness. It doesn't look for feeling good. It doesn't look for anything positive. It doesn't look for a positive aspect or any type of perspective that creates safety. It's not looking for safety. It's looking for danger to avoid it. It's looking for the negative. It's looking for the bad. And our brain is actually designed this way. So when people sit there and they're so upset that, why can't I be happy? Why can't I just heal from this? Why can't I? You're not designed to be. It's a miracle in our mind, the way that everything is made up. It's a miracle we have the ability to even smile for a moment, let alone sustainably. Our mind is it's very, very, very ancient and archaic in its design, that it is looking for sharp edges. It is looking for the deep hole. It is looking for the threat. It is looking for the danger all the time. And because we're not in imminent danger the way we used to be, it still finds the sharp edges. But the sharp edges, instead of being a tiger or a threatening tribe, it is the uncomfortable conversation with my boss, or the email that I do not want to send to my client. It is the being honest with a habit that I've had. It's so we self-preserve when we bubble wrap ourselves into these places of comfort. And so self-sabotage is nothing more than our desire wanting to be in a certain area, and then getting up to that point and your brain going, no, 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 we don't do this, regulate, and it pulls us back. It's like a snap. And so an example with your friend, she may truly want to heal because she wants to get out of the pain, but the pain is her imprint. And her brain has already structured a formal answer around that scenario, that it was bad, that it was dangerous, that she's no longer safe, that she will never be safe again, and she needs to stay in this bubble. And so anytime she journeys outside of it, which I would venture to guess that if she does microdosing before she handles her handles the trauma in a different way, she might find herself walking outside of that and then having a traumatic experience inside of herself by not being able to regulate back into a self-controlled, self-decided container of where she's safe. She needs to be able to create safety moving outside of this by establishing safety as she moves outside of this bubble of hers that she's established, that her brain has established is the safe zone. So what happens is when a trauma occurs, your brain establishes almost an overriding umbrella statement that nothing is safe. And that's when you see people have these visceral reactions to anything that reminds, we see the abusive partner a picture and we move into that state. Our mind doesn't know that we're not there anymore because that trigger has just been plugged into all places of our brain, that this is all dangerous. And so we have to go into that trauma and redefine what is true, what actually occurred, how we're going to view it, how we're going to label it, what it could possibly have done for us. We have to go in and almost erase the way it's been written and rewrite it in a way that doesn't invalidate it, because there's people out there that experienced immense trauma that would not take the trauma away because of what they were able to gain from it. And trauma is not a fact as far as the damage that occurs after. I don't like the industry, the way that we're presenting trauma. We're presenting it as almost a death sentence to choice.
Yeah, I would agree.
I
would agree.
The problem with that is that there are statistic problems with this, because there are people out there that have experienced trauma that we don't even know how we could perceive ever being able to live or walk normally after the event. And they're inspirational speakers, they're authors, they live beautiful lives. So if it's a fact, then everyone would be affected the same way. Everyone.
And what is it that when you can take two people that have a different perception of a similar situation, high trauma situation, one person in that space will speak to the negative. So it's always, passive aggressive language, right? The just kidding. And I'm telling you folks right now, if you ever come across me and you do just kidding, that's the end of this. That's the end of the conversation, because just kidding is it's always preceded by something mean. There's always a negative in there. What is I know that there's a biological wiring in the brain. Why do some people at their core of their essence swing positive while many and the masses either hold in that center or swing negative?
Well, so the only difference is a habit of language and lens. One has taken a participatory role in their definitions of everything, and one has just defaulted. We either go to the we travel the route of our design, or we travel the route of our default, and it's a habit. That's why my podcast is named The Happiness Habit, because happiness is a habit. It's a skill that can be honed. But just like anything, habits are not this mysterious 10 days, 21 days. How long does it take to form a habit? It doesn't. None of that occurs, because when you get on day 21 and it's not a habit yet, it doesn't matter if you took 20 days forming the habit if you're going to go 21 days and just kind of expect it to kick off. A habit is something that you have done to the point of memorization, regardless of what it is. And so if you have a habit of looking at the negative, it's reinforced already by your brain's design and your brain's makeup. But additionally, if you practice it and you choose it, and you are using the language that reinforces it, and you're viewing only the negative by choosing your focus, you're really in a sore state, because you have almost doubled down on the efforts that it's already going downstream. Now, for somebody who's positive, there is a point in time where somebody who's traditionally positive had to fight their default. They've just chosen to fight that default. And however that occurred, whenever that occurred in them, they have a habit of being able to freely choose whether they are going to look at a negative or positive, because both are available in any moment. But then to the point of memorization, all they've done is consistently chosen the positive angle, the positive aspect until it's memorized, which means they don't have to choose it anymore. So it's not that there are people that are just predisposed to being more positive, being more negative. There was a point in time because of our design where they did have to fight the tendency and fight the initial flow of thought toward the negative, because it's always seeking the danger, the sharp edge. And then to do it to where I would say that the habit, while it's being chosen toward a positive, gets us to where we can kind of cancel out the design to where we understand that we have the choice. But then to make it a habit in the positive, we have to do even more. It's memorized, and then it's just the new default, the new design is by choice. So I don't know if that answered your question fully, but
No, it does, because you know, it is interesting to see, and I think it's fascinating when you see 2, 3, 4 siblings within the same set of circumstances, and you'll have such a vast difference in how they deal with that set of circumstances and how they move forward. I find it all incredibly fascinating, and at the end of the day, I think biggest uh the biggest thing that people can do is to reach out and seek support, seek help, seek guidance. Everybody needs a guide. Everybody needs a coach. Nobody gets to the Olympics without a coach. I have a girlfriend who is a gold medalist in wrestling, and the coach she went to the Rio Olympics with was not the coach she started wrestling with in third grade. And quite frankly, she could take the coach. Like, she was bigger than him and put him on her shoulders and everything. But the reality is that coach and mentor is the guide, the person that helps guide you. I want to, if you're open to this, and if you're not open to anything I ask, just let me know. Totally cool. I always ask a story of resilience, but I want to go back to that empty house. I want to go back to that empty house. The moment that you walked from what so many are working to achieve. And you had that dinner on the crate, on the Home Depot box, and you had Christmas dinner and you're sitting there. Can you share with us some of the language within, some of the dialogue within? Because I believe story is the currency of success. And your story of what you were speaking to yourself at that moment could actually resonate with somebody who right now in the same spot, who is working diligently to move forward, but they need that story. They need your story. Can you share with us what was going through that moment of resiliency within your life?
absolutely. So the biggest thing is that all of the places in my life that I had made a firm statement on, I had punctuated everything with periods to try and create security. I am this, I am that, I have this label, I've attained this a dollar amount. Everything was very neatly packaged and certain. And I realized that because it was moving in the direction of something that my inner knowing what didn't want, every single box that I would pack in that certainty was torture. It was painful. And so in this house, it was like all of the boxes were unpacked. Everything was open. Everything where there was a period, there was now a question mark. And it gave me this sense of freedom. And it gave me the ability to start over again, even though up until that point, I didn't even know that that's what I needed. And I was able to now make decisions and really measure them up with alignment and find out what alignment was. We often live our lives in a state of the self-inflicted torment because we don't recognize how much of our goings about, how much of our daily routine, how much of our life structure is built on something we don't even want. and something that's not even true to who we are. And that is not even the story that I would say was the most resilient, because it was just such a free reset button. There was nothing to be resilient against. I had let go of all of the resistance. I had let go of everything that was cornering me to fully to go further into a life I didn't want. I had no resistance at that point. That was the ultimate get rid of it. If it's not me, it's not me. And yeah, so that when I think of resilience, I don't think of moments like that, which I know a lot of people think, you know, you completely uprooted your entire life. How does that not bring up resistance? It was actually in the me trying to reestablish and go in a different way, knowing who I was, but then not fully knowing that. And then, you know, going down this rabbit hole. Nope, that's not me. Going down this rabbit hole. Nope, that's not me. Going down this rabbit hole. Nope, that's not me. And that constant recalibration to self requires the utmost resilience, because if you don't know who you are, you will live out who you're not by default. The world is demanding that of you.
And I'm going to circle back around. I love how you said that you removed the periods, the definitive, and created the question mark. And I'm going to bring that back around. So, but before we do that, I do want you to share, you are currently working on a book, and or is it in process? Like, where are you at on your book? Because by the way, if you guys want to see a great website, go check out Kara's website. Your website is gorgeous. I love how it's clean, and yet there's a real energy that comes through. You have like such a great energy to you, and it comes through. But go to the website. Your cover for your book that you have is absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. Beautifully done. So tell me a little bit about why you want to publish this book and when we can expect it, because I know your list is open now. So walk me through that.
Yes. So The Happiness Habit is the first book. I'm already working on The Unshakable Woman, the second one. So I need to slow down and get one out into the ether. But The Happiness Habit was basically because a lot of things people don't know about me is that I was depressed. I was on antidepressants. I did have postpartum depression. I was suicidal. I did have a lot of childhood trauma. I had repressed memories. I went through all of the depths that most people can go that nobody can really relate to. I went everywhere. I was in an abusive marriage. I was in an abusive childhood. I mean, everything you can stack where it said, these are all the disadvantages. And I had chased down therapy. I had gone to church. I had tried the new age meditation. I tried the crystals. I tried the, you know, the substances where you go on an emotional trip. I tried the travel and the gurus and the events and the workshops, and I did everything that I could to try and fix it. And I vested so much of my time and focus and concentration on each individual modality, and the mindsets and mantras weren't working, and the therapy, the talk therapy, and continuously regurgitating the same story over and over and over found me in a deeper hole. The medication made me feel like a zombie. And I finally realized, what is it? Something wrong with, like, what is actually going on? What is wrong with me? The question a lot of us get to at the end of another thing that doesn't work to fix us. And at the bottom of my rock bottom, I realized rock bottom has a basement. And what I came to discover is I didn't realize that I was writing The Happiness Habit back then in all of my journals of these self inquiries that I call this initial. I have the perspective, the purge, and the promise are the 3 points that I talk about. And the point that I had gotten to reach that perspective needed to lay the groundwork for everything. And then I needed to purge the things that I thought that I knew, thought that I believed. And I found a complete mental, physical, emotional, everything, a structure that I could use to find my way out of the tunnel that I had gotten myself into, and then I needed to apply it to somebody. At first, I wasn't interested in it. It was just my own journey. It was just journals. It was just stacks of stuff that I had created that were my own journey, were my own narration. And then I helped apply it to a friend in need, And I was just curious to see if we could start with where I started, because they too had experienced all levels of exploration and found and came up empty. And I applied the initial inventory, the audit. Then we moved into kind of a purging process of what is not and what, getting clear on what we want by getting clear on what we don't want, and just purging and discerning those two categories, and then making a promise to ourselves and reverse engineering that identity. And it worked for them. And then I realized I was really onto something. And after that point, it was just about, before the book came about, it was bringing people into the Happiness Habit podcast, bringing people into the Unshakable Woman space. And to be unshakable means that any life circumstance could have already happened to you or could happen to you in the future, and you are unmoved. You are solid in yourself. You know who you are. You have that identity. And so in that solidity, in that self, that solidarity with self, you know, if you're in a toxic relationship, you don't have to have a girlfriend tell you. You know if the way that you're treating your body is for you, is healthful. You know what your mind needs that day. You know what you need to do with your routine. You know what changes you need to make. You know how you have your answers. You become a wellspring of your own answers. You're not looking to social media. You're not trying to follow some genius. You're not trying to model or copy off of somebody else's model of success. You know that you have your own. And that is essentially where it all stemmed from.
And I heard journaling in there. Journaling seems to be a common denominator for people who are on a quest. And yeah, like you said, you were writing the book before you even realized you were writing the book. That's awesome. That truly is awesome. Where can people find you, follow you, subscribe to you, engage? What are the options?
So my website is a happy place. I love it. I love the conversations that are created there. I love anybody that goes to the contact form. There's free bits of, if you want to listen to the podcast, if you want to read along some of my long exploration processes that you can put in yourself. The website's just a great place for anybody, no matter what walk of life and where they are in their personal healing journey. But Instagram is where I hang out. I'm not a social media buff. I don't like being ever present everywhere. It takes up too much of my time. So I focus on Instagram because I just like the modality and the user interface and how we can talk and chat with each other. So that's where I'm typically most often. But my website is definitely for those who want to find a way to plug a piece into their life and figure out what kind of change, one tiny little change, 1%. And I'm good. My website is good for the people who need 1% and are ready to go all in and everywhere in between.
And that's karapayton.com. So if you're just listening in and not actually looking at the show notes, it's KARAPAYTON.com. Do take a look at it. And for those of you who are looking to set up a website, go take a look at it because your photography is gorgeous. I love this one where you're sitting with your jeans and stuff. Like the energy on your site is beautiful, and it definitely matches up with you. I always like to ask a quote because I believe that, and it's okay to borrow from others when you feel that your cup is empty. And that's what I hope, that these quotes or these thoughts can help fill somebody's cup when they need it. So, Kara, can you share with us your thought or quote?
My quote that I tend to live by, and it's still a reminder, something that I hold myself to, and in just a moment where I forget, and we forget. This is why we have these mantras, why we have these quotes, is something to act as a touchstone to tether us back to a greater purpose. And mine is, my energy creates my outcome. Because no matter where I am in life, everything we do comes back to this. Everything we perceive in the world, how we speak, how we treat others, how we behave, and who we are ultimately always falls back to the energy we're presenting in that moment. The energy affects the lens, it affects the language, it affects our identity, it affects our behavior, it affects our relationships. So it goes to say, and it always acts as a reminder to me, that if I'm ever experiencing anything I don't want to experience, I can usually always trace it back down to the energy in which I started it. And it always retethers me to focus on the main issue, the core root of things. What is the energy that I'm showing up in? And if I can calibrate and if I can refresh that energy to align with the outcome I want, then I'm really onto something.
You know, and I'm like I said, I see the energy. You showed up. You've presented exactly like what you had on paper. I love this. I love the fact that your voice is out there in the mix, because we need more voices that can help guide people when they're blind, right? Because that's really important, folks. And I promise you this: you are worth it. You're worth it. Every person out there that has been given opportunity to breathe is worth it. And I just want to close on this one thing. Everybody that knows me well, knows that I have a very strong entrepreneurial background. So I'm always thinking of which closing, opening, closing, all these other things. And something that really stuck with me today that I just want to kind of close on there is when you shift your definitive language with that period to an open language of a question mark. That's called an open-ended question. And you never know where it goes. It can take you so far. And those are the questions that create the new dialogue and the new opportunities. And I loved that you shared that. I never thought of it in that way, Kara. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All righty, folks. That's it for me today. All I'm going to say is, you deserve to be kind to yourself. So invest in yourself, be kind to yourself, show up for yourself. Nobody else is going to do it for you. So do it for yourself, right? The world deserves the best you. Until next time, thank you, Kara. Everybody,
Thank you.
be good to yourself. Thank you for joining us here today at Kim Talks Resilience. I'm your host, Kim Hayden, and I'd love to invite you to our resilient community at resilientgift.com. That's resilientgift.com, and we'll send you our magazine and tickets for upcoming events and all sorts of cool things we do here. So be sure to keep watching, and you know what? Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share, because we all know that sharing is